Hello, and welcome to Payroll Ponderings, a podcast on HR.com's brand new Future of Payroll community, an online alliance of payroll professionals in the works today and set to officially launch in February 2025. This will coincide with related research from HR.com and an associated virtual event. I am your host, Brent Skinner, executive leader of the community, member of HR.com's Future of Payroll Research Advisory Board, and founder and principal of Open Window Strategies, LLC. Joining me for this conversation is my fellow board member on the Future of Payroll Research Advisory Board here at HR.com, Nathan North. Nathan is a bona fide payroll expert and a board member elsewhere, including Global Payroll Geeks. Enjoy the episode.
Okay, so let's talk payroll.
Yeah, there's this concept. There's a lot of money that's invested in technology stacks that are built around assumptions about how things are going to be moving forward, right? And so there's a lot of sunk costs in there. And so there's a lot of sort of emotional investment in those systems too. So then you think about what is the impetus that leads to those situations? Well, you're sort of anticipating. So maybe maybe you see where I'm going with this. So global, we're kind of anticipating, and that's for for innovation too. There's a lot of investment put into into innovating for certain presumptions, right? So I think there's a lot of money being invested into figuring out how to automate global payroll or to create a global payroll engine. But I wonder, think about crypto, right? So I think people, it seems to me that a lot of these vendors aren't paying enough attention to the fact that our relationship to obtaining and keeping our money might change radically in the next 5 to certainly 10 years. Because with crypto, how much do you okay, so there's the tax, the incredibly complex
Yep.
worldwide regulatory environment, right? And that'll always be there even with crypto, I think, right? But I mean, how does in terms of actually the calculations and actually getting the money to you talked about
Statutory authorities.
the statutory authorities, yeah, right. Well, aren't they kind of marginalized when we start talking about crypto and this kind of stuff?
To a certain extent. And for example, at Global Upside, we had a few cryptocurrency companies that were our clients,
Hmm.
and we had to figure out a way to compliantly pay using both regular currency and cryptocurrency. And so obviously we had to deploy a legal team to help us navigate that. And we're talking um, now 4 or 5 years ago. So it was a relatively new concept. I recently just read a study that 30% of companies have some type of cryptocurrency attached to wages.
Mhm.
They're paying in crypto, partly in crypto and partly in standard currency.
Mhm.
So if we look at, it's really looking at the cryptocurrency, translating that into what would the value be in standard currency,
Mhm.
and then taxing it based off of that standard currency rate.
Mhm.
So is it possible to pay in both standard currency and cryptocurrency? Absolutely.
Mhm.
There is definitely a way. There is a path forward on that, and companies are starting to adopt that. There's very little system-driven ability to do so.
Mhm.
It's still a very manual process. I think with your comments of the investment that has been made within the payroll industry as a whole, I mean, last count I had that there's been close to $1 billion that have been invested over the spread of the payroll industry. However, most of that is in the EOR business,
Mm,
a large majority of that. And what I've gone to, Brent, is you have your traditional EORs, and then you have this what I consider a newer category of your FinTech
yeah.
EORs.
Mm,
And there's a clear distinction between the two.
yeah.
The FinTech market space has the war chest because that's where the money is. That's also where you generate more valuation within the
Mm,
industry. Your traditional EORs are going to be heavier on the compliance side,
mm,
where your EOR, the new FinTech EORs, are not as focused on compliance. However, within the last 30 to 45 days, there's been a realization within the FinTech EOR space that maybe we should start building compliance within our product.
can
And
you?
that's the race to the top.
Okay. Okay. Can you describe to me a little bit in a little bit more detail, like what is a fintech EOR versus a regular EOR?
So yeah, I'll give you some very specific examples. So a fintech EOR would be your Rippling, your Deal, your Remote type organizations. Those I would say are the top three in the fintech market space for EOR,
Mhm.
where they've been infused with cash for their war chests.
Okay.
So that I would categorize those folks within the fintech space. So they're most of their executives come from fintech, so they have a fintech mindset, and that's why I've actually put them in their own subset of a category.
Do they have fintech functionality or just fintech DNA or fintech uh, sort of the
I
spirit
would
of fintech?
say, yeah, in the market leaders, they have definitely all have fintech DNA. From a leadership standpoint,
Mm,
on down to the director level. So from the C-suite to the director level, it's fintech DNA. I think where they start to distinguish themselves greatly is where you come to the fact that do they offer fintech type solutions? And yes, in different bits and pieces of their overall ecosystem
okay.
and what they have built in compared to the traditional EOR service providers.
Okay. Can you give an example of that? Like what's a fintech sort of functionality that an EOR, let's say like Rippling or any of or remote or deal, like what is an example of that type of functionality or that type of aspiration?
So, from a front end point of view, they're wrapping in not only the payroll piece of the traditional EOR, but they're wrapping in HCM,
Hmm.
they're wrapping in IT, they're wrapping in employee expenses.
Okay.
They're they're building a complete ecosystem around the EOR that you would see it from a standard basis from like a workday type product
Hmm.
for the specific to the EOR industry.
Okay. 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 So a broader play within the under the aegis of being an EOR, a broader and
So
deeper.
yes, a broader, a deeper um, an ecosystem where the actual users, whether they're and whether they're part of the hiring team or an employee, they're
Mm,
seeing one system to go into
yeah.
versus multiple systems, like with like a single sign-on type solution where you're having to go to different systems. So the
Yeah.
fintech EOR space will have time and attendance built
Okay.
in right away.
Okay.
They'll have holiday tracking built
Yeah.
in. So it creates this one-stop shop for the EOR market users to go in and not have to log in to multiple systems.
That's a better customer retention strategy for Neo.
Yeah, and if you look at the fintech space, I mean, really, that's what they've really have done in fintech is really create that better experience for the user. So in this case, they not only have a better user experience for the actual payroll HR users, but also the employee experience being on a single platform. I mean, to the extent where, okay, my client has hired an employee. We're deploying the IT equipment directly to them. We have all the tracking as far as all the hardware, serial numbers, the type of hard disk imaging that we want to have or solid state imaging that we want to have on that computer to send to that employee that is in a remote location, let's just say in Germany, because we want to explore that market and see if it's going to be viable for our organization.
Mm,
Now, the transition that we've seen is EOR, the original purpose of EOR was to allow companies that didn't have entities to go in and do their market research and see if it's going to be viable. However, in the last 8 to 12 months, we've seen a shift where companies are employing anywhere from 100 to 400 employees through the EORs,
mm,
which can have a compliance challenge
mm-hmm,
because now you're looking at nexus, imminent domain type challenges because, okay, are they conducting R&D? Are they actually selling and generating revenue? And so there's governments around the world that are kind of looking at the space saying, okay, how are we going to govern for this?
mm, mm,
So Mexico, for example, came out and basically has instituted some laws that you really have to, and this is the interesting part. You have more of the traditional EORs that now, if you go to them and say, "Hey, I want to be in Mexico," they're going to say, "Okay, you have to sign a 6 month or a 1 year contract." In order to have this person in Mexico. Because at the end of the day, if you release this employee, let's say after 3 or 4 months, because maybe the performance isn't as strong, you still have to pay them out for the 6 months or the 1 year in order to be compliant and for that EOR to be compliant.
the fintech people who are going into EOR, what is their vision? What is what is it about their fintech mindset that has attracted them to the EOR space? Because I understand you paint a really good picture of what they're doing. What they're doing is very much HCM focused. You know, the expense management being the that's also HCM focused, but we all know that's where interfaces with the FP&A and that sort of stuff. But
Well, that's the
what
hot
is the
potato.
yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. No, everybody's like, oh yeah, oh yeah. What is it about EORs that fintech people, because these are financial technology people, and I think fintech, I think, banking technology and this kind of stuff. To me, it's all money related, so banking, so the global payroll piece of it makes sense to me. But what else? Or is that what they see? They see a global payroll um, upside to this, and they're just building out window dressing around this to make it attractive to to acquire um, to acquire clients, because the more employees they have under their system, the more potentially lucrative their global payroll related activities will be. Did I just answer my own question?
Essentially, you hit the nail on the head. It's for the fintech's part sector. It is all about volume
Yeah.
and ease of use of their system. And when we talk about volume, they're also not as risk adverse as the traditional EORs. So they're willing to take that risk, possibly even take the fines that come along with it to have it. But if you go into a deeper level, and you touched on this, it's about the total number of dollars or euros that they're sending out.
Hmm.
And it's the money movement part of,
Yeah.
which, okay, money movement sounds like a fraud type wordsmith system. However, folks have changed it to payroll funding. It's money movement. So money movement as a whole, bulking up on that and the ease of moving those funds. So whether
Mm-hmm.
it's acquiring like a smaller bank that has a good relationship and good rails to a larger bank that can disperse funds, not only net payment, but also the payment to the statutory regulators,
Mm-hmm.
that is the key. Now, that is still, in my perspective, from an industry standpoint, that is still all in development,
Mm-hmm.
but that is the ultimate play, and that's more of the long-term play. So I would say you have compliance first, then you have the ease of moving the money into the net payments, into the statutory regulatory bodies, and then you have more of a full suite. Now, that's part of the race to the top. However, the challenge is not every government works the same.
Yeah.
Not every connection is the same. Not all the compliance rules are the same. And so it's really being able to dissect what the laws are in each country. The standard payroll process does not change from country to country. So, there's this dichotomy of, okay, is global payroll truly global payroll?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, there is no system, there's no EOR provider that is truly global yet, because there's still a need to use local partners, especially in countries that you can only use certified payroll systems that are certified by the government, say France and Germany. Um, and they're usually in local language. Um, and so there's this race to build payroll engines. The challenge is there are organizations that have built payroll engines. However, they're now having to really go back and say, okay, what are the compliance requirements that we need to add to our systems from a rules-based methodology?
So that to me is a constant that should be sort of a like an IV drip just mainlined into the system. It's never finished, the work there.
No, it's never finished. There's always a maintenance piece to that because laws are constantly changing. I mean, this year so far, I mean, outside of the US, we're up to about 750 legislative changes around the world,
Yeah.
and that it's a constant moving ball. That is why my my overall feeling is we're not really going to have a truly global payroll system, so to
Mm.
speak, until we're able to deploy a quantum computing computer system to replace the mainframes of yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to meet you in a different spot, but the same on the same spirit of things. I was going to say, you're right on the money with the quantum computing. I was going to say AI, but it's probably going to be some sort of a combination of the two. Now that I think of it,
Yes,
right? Because the AI
yes,
is going to be the AI is going to be able to understand and translate those legislative changes much more readily and rapidly to
yes,
approach real time informing of the systems. Right, you have AI tributaries to the systems from all of the main statutory authorities across the globe, informing that engine. Um, of those changes. And that's something that a mainframe can't handle, but
yes.
quantum computing can. And so we'll get to a point eventually where, see, my question is though, because that sounds like victory. That sounds like okay, now we have a global payroll engine, and
Right.
we're are we? So I guess we get back to I didn't anticipate getting going full circle here, but I guess we get back to my original point is This may seem out there, but do you see a future where some of these, there might be sort of a dissolution or a massive mitigation of these, that might not be the right word, consolidation of these statutory authorities. I mean, how long will these statutory authorities kind of hold out? Will there be at some point um, a a much more direct path to paying people globally?
Yeah, I mean, I think we already see that transition happening. I mean, if you look at the continent of Africa,
Mm,
which I strongly feel is the next frontier,
mm,
you see a lot of individualized countries adopting the EU type systems of the payee systems.
mm.
And as more countries adopt those systems, so the perfect example, which is not perfect, which is the HMRC. If we look at how model is transitioning through a lot of the continent of Africa,
Mhm.
that creates that ability to have those connections from whether it's an API connection, whether it's an RPA connection to those statutory authorities to be able to automate a lot of the pieces that have been challenging for multinational organizations to truly expand. Very interesting. I got a hold of a piece from that was written about payroll from 1945.
Wow.
And I read it, and it was really interesting because what was spotlighted in that documentation was actually the same challenges we're facing today.
Mm,
We were facing in 1945.
mm,
So the industry as a whole is ripe for a complete transformation. So we've talked about, companies going through transformations, digital transformations, but really the payroll space, and this takes us full circle back to your original thought process, is that you have everything coming full circle to the fact that we're now technology has caught up to a certain extent, and AI is a big piece of that. Though I still feel AI and payroll is a very young newborn that still needs to develop into a full-fledged human
mm,
element, talking through AI to really transform the industry.
yeah.
But I think the key is still quantum computing mixed with AI
Mm.
is really going to create the ultimate solution.
It's very interesting stuff.